Forget real crimes, we have suburban emergencies. Imagine dialing 911 because your neighbor's Christmas lights are still up in July, or demanding the police arrest someone immediately just because their grass is slightly too long. We are tracking down the pettiest people on Earth, from solar panel death rays to illegal garden gnomes that are allegedly spying. These are the 49 most insane neighbor disputes that prove common sense is officially extinct. 1. An elderly woman in Florida dialed emergency services in a complete panic. She claimed her neighbor had committed a brutal chemical attack on her precious poodle. When the confused officers arrived at the scene, they found a very confused dog wagging its tail. The woman insisted the liquid weapon was spicy dill pickle juice. She actually grabbed the poor dog's head and shoved it toward the officer's face. She demanded he smell the wet fur as evidence of the assault. The officer refused to sniff the dog but noted the poodle smelled delicious. The neighbor watched from his porch while eating a sandwich and laughing uncontrollably at the chaotic scene. 2. A grumpy suburban dad decided to ruin the 4th of July for everyone on his block. He called dispatch screaming about a toxic cloud invading his home. The police rushed over expecting a chemical leak. They found the man standing in his kitchen pointing at an open window. He claimed the neighbor's brisket smoke was assaulting his pristine granite countertops. The officer suggested he simply close the window to stop the smell. The man refused and said he had a right to fresh air while demanding the barbecue be shut down immediately. The pitmaster next door just kept flipping burgers while the officer walked away shaking his head. 3. A frantic woman called the police station hyperventilating about a criminal act in progress. The dispatcher prepared for a burglary report but got a lawn care emergency instead. She screamed that the neighbor's grass was exactly 3 inches too tall. She claimed it was a direct assault on her property value and demanded officers bring handcuffs. The police explained that tall grass is not a felony offense. She insisted they were aiding and abetting a neighborhood tragedy. The neighbor was actually out of town for a funeral while she measured his lawn with a ruler. The officers left while she threatened to sue the entire city council. 4. An agitated young man dialed 911, claiming he was the victim of a biological weapon attack. He told officers his throat was closing up because of a toxic cloud. When police arrived, they did not find gas leaks but smelled cheap musk. The man pointed at his neighbor, who was just checking the mail wearing too much cologne. He insisted the scent was trespassing across the property line and causing him migraines. He wanted the neighbor scrubbed down or arrested for air pollution. The neighbor just sprayed more body spray and winked at the officers. The caller slammed his door and started taping up his windows. 5. An elderly woman in Florida dialed emergency services in a complete panic. She claimed her neighbor had committed a brutal chemical attack on her precious poodle. When the confused officers arrived at the scene, they found a very confused dog wagging its tail. The woman insisted the liquid weapon was spicy dill pickle juice. She actually grabbed the poor dog's head and shoved it toward the officer's face. She demanded he smell the wet fur as evidence of the assault. The officer refused to sniff the dog, but noted the poodle smelled delicious. The neighbor watched from his porch while eating a sandwich and laughing uncontrollably at the chaotic scene. 6. A local neighborhood Grinch decided to wage war on holiday spirit during a heat wave. He called the authorities to report a severe case of disturbing the peace. The disturbance was a string of festive lights hanging on a porch in July. He claimed the blinking red and green bulbs were causing him emotional distress. He told the police the festive cheer was outdated and mocking the summer season. The officers tried not to laugh while explaining there is no law against being merry. The homeowner turned the lights to the blinking setting just to annoy him more. The Grinch stormed off, muttering about the calendar dates. 7. A paranoid grandmother peeked through her blinds and dialed the non-emergency line with a tip. She reported a suspicious figure circling the block repeatedly for over an hour. She insisted he had no dog and was clearly casing houses for a robbery. The police stopped the man who was wearing high-tech fitness gear. It turned out he was just trying to close the rings on his Apple Watch. He had to walk around the block 5 more times to hit his goal. The grandmother refused to believe him and wrote down his license plate number anyway. She told the police that walking without a dog is unnatural behavior. 8. An uptight socialite called the station in tears regarding a visual disaster next door. She claimed her neighbor was exposing the entire street to indecent materials. The responding officers rushed over, expecting a flashing incident, but found wet clothes. The neighbor was simply hanging clean laundry on a line to dry in the sun. The caller shrieked that seeing oversized underwear was lowering her property value by thousands. She demanded the police cut the line and confiscate the offending garments immediately. The officers explained that drying clothes is not a sex crime. The neighbor proceeded to hang up her largest granny panties while maintaining eye contact. 9. A self-proclaimed patriot called dispatch to report a treasonous act on his street. He told the operator that the Constitution was being trampled on in broad daylight. The police arrived to find a confused teenager raising a flag on a pole. The caller screamed that the flag was 3 inches too low and touching a branch. He demanded the boy be taken into custody for violating the federal flag code. The officers explained that being bad at hanging flags is not a jailable offense. The man saluted the police car while shedding a single tear for justice. The teen just shrugged and went back inside to play video games. 10. A grumpy suburban dad decided to ruin the 4th of July for everyone on his block. He called dispatch, screaming about a toxic cloud invading his home. The police rushed over expecting a chemical leak. They found the man standing in his kitchen pointing at an open window. He claimed the neighbor's brisket smoke was assaulting his pristine granite countertops. The officer suggested he simply close the window to stop the smell. The man refused and said he had a right to fresh air. While demanding the barbecue be shut down immediately, the pitmaster next door just kept flipping burgers while the officer walked away shaking his head. 11. A frantic mother called the station, claiming a biological weapon was deployed next door. She screamed that toxic fumes were melting her family's lungs. Police arrived expecting a major gas leak, but found a pile of vegetable peels. The eco-friendly neighbor was simply starting a compost pile for her garden. The caller insisted the smell of decomposing bananas was a hazmat situation. She demanded men in white suits remove the dirt immediately. The officer took a deep breath and told her it smelled like earth. The neighbor offered her a tomato as a peace offering. She refused and ran inside holding her breath to survive. 12. A paranoid uncle dialed emergency services whispering about an international spy ring. He claimed the house next door was gathering intelligence on his daily routine. Officers arrived to inspect the high-tech surveillance equipment causing the panic. It was a standard security camera angled slightly toward the shared driveway. The man insisted the lens was zooming in on his barbecue techniques. He demanded the police confiscate the footage before it was sold to foreign enemies. The neighbor showed the officers the live feed, which was just a video of a squirrel. The uncle put tin foil on his windows just to be safe and hid under his bed. 13. An environmental crusader called the police to report a crime against the planet. She told the dispatcher that a reckless criminal was wasting precious energy resources. The police found a confused old man who had left his porch light on. The caller screamed that the yellow bulb was hurting her eyes during the day. She claimed the wasted electricity was personally causing global warming. She wanted the man fined and the bulb smashed into pieces immediately. The old man explained he just forgot to flip the switch that morning. The officer flipped it off, and the woman cheered like she had saved the world single-handedly. 14. A nosy housewife monitored her street with binoculars and called the authorities. She reported a drug den operating in broad daylight with frequent couriers. Police set up a perimeter expecting a major cartel bust. They discovered a house full of college gamers ordering lunch. The boys had ordered 3 different pizzas in the span of 4 hours. The woman insisted that nobody eats that much pepperoni without criminal intent. She claimed the pizza boxes were clearly filled with contraband cash. The officers opened a box and found a half-eaten crust inside. The gamers offered a slice to the cops while the woman fumed silently. 15. A perfectionist homeowner used a laser measuring tool and immediately dialed 911. He reported a structural invasion and demanded an emergency demolition crew. The officers arrived to find a brand new wooden fence standing tall. The man screamed that the posts were exactly 1 inch over the property line. He claimed this was a hostile takeover of his land. He wanted the neighbor arrested for trespassing with lumber. The neighbor was actually inside watching TV and had no idea about the war. Police told the man to call a surveyor instead of emergency services. He started kicking the fence until his foot hurt and he limped away. 16. A grumpy insomniac called the station claiming a nightclub had opened next door. He reported blinding neon lights and visual harassment attacking his bedroom. Police arrived to find a family watching a football game on their patio. The caller insisted the glow from the screen was light pollution. He claimed he could see the score from his window and it was distracting. He demanded the television be seized as evidence of disturbing the peace. The family agreed to turn the brightness down slightly. The man yelled that he could still see the colors. The officers left him to buy better curtains or a sleep mask. 17. A dizzy woman called for medical assistance and police intervention simultaneously. She claimed her neighbor was using psychological warfare to make her sick. The weapon was a small, decorative windmill spinning in the garden. She told officers the spinning motion was hypnotizing her against her will. She insisted she could not look away and was getting severe vertigo. She wanted the wind arrested or the decoration destroyed immediately. The neighbor explained it was a gift from her granddaughter. The officer suggested the woman just stop staring at it. She claimed the windmill was calling her name and refused to move from the window. 18. An aggressive HOA president bypassed the board and called the police directly. He reported a visual felony that was destroying the neighborhood economy. Officers rushed over expecting vandalism, but found a freshly painted mailbox. The box was painted a bright shade of teal instead of standard beige. The caller screamed that the ugly color was lowering his home value. He demanded the police arrest the homeowner for bad taste. The artist came out with a brush and offered to paint the caller's face. The police explained that being tacky is not a crime. The man stood guard by the mailbox to warn potential buyers of the horror. 19. A health-conscious jogger stopped in her tracks and dialed emergency services. She claimed a lethal gas attack was underway in the driveway next door. The police arrived to find a teenager sitting in an idling car. The engine was running to warm up the heater on a freezing morning. The woman insisted the exhaust fumes were invading her lungs through the walls. She wanted the car impounded for attempted chemical poisoning. The teen just wanted to defrost his windshield before driving to school. Officers told the woman to jog in the other direction. She held her breath until her face turned blue and ran away. 20. A superstitious bachelor called the cops with a terrified, trembling voice. He reported a gang of small intruders watching his every move. The police did a tactical sweep of the yard but found nothing alive. The man pointed a shaking finger at the neighbor's garden gnomes. He claimed the ceramic figures were arranged specifically to stare at him. He insisted their painted eyes were following him into the shower. He wanted the neighbor charged with harassment and the gnomes smashed. The neighbor explained she just liked the fairy tale aesthetic. The officer told the man to close his blinds if the gnomes got too scary for him. 21. A self-appointed traffic controller called the station in a complete rage. He reported a massive green wall blocking critical sightlines. Officers arrived expecting a fallen tree but found a hedge. The bushes were slightly overgrown near the corner intersection. The caller insisted the leaves were a deadly hazard to motorists. He screamed that the neighbor was setting a trap for unsuspecting drivers. He demanded the foliage be handcuffed and cut down immediately. The homeowner was actually an elderly lady who lost her shears. The police suggested he help her trim it instead of yelling. He refused and stood on the corner directing traffic with a whistle. 22. A hysterical woman dialed 911 because her street looked like a landfill. She claimed a sanitation crisis was unfolding right next door. The police rushed over to find 2 blue recycling bins. They were still sitting by the curb at 4 in the afternoon. The woman shrieked that the plastic containers were a visual assault. She insisted the trash receptacles were attracting rats and lowering standards. She wanted the neighbor jailed for violating the unwritten code of curb appeal. The neighbor was working a double shift and could not move them yet. The officer told the woman to look away. She stood there glaring at the bins until sunset. 23. A paranoid man called the authorities to report a wiretapping incident. He claimed his privacy was being invaded by a loud surveillance agent. The police arrived and found a teenage girl on a patio chair. She was talking on her phone about high school drama. The caller insisted her voice was penetrating his walls and stealing his peace. He screamed that he was forced to learn about her breakup against his will. He demanded she be gagged or arrested for verbal trespassing. The girl just rolled her eyes and put in AirPods. The man went back inside and put pillows over his ears to block the silence. 24. An elderly mechanic called the station complaining about a mysterious sci-fi noise. He reported a constant high-pitched frequency that was melting his brain. Officers investigated and found an electric car charging in the driveway. The Tesla was making a faint humming sound while it powered up. The man insisted the battery was emitting mind control waves into his bedroom. He wanted the car unplugged and towed to a galaxy far away. The owner tried to explain how electricity works to the angry neighbor. The caller refused to listen and wore a metal pot on his head. He claimed it was the only way to sleep safely that night. 25. A suspicious housewife called the police regarding a botanical spy operation. She claimed the neighbor was planting agents to watch her undress. The officers arrived to find a row of beautiful tall sunflowers. The yellow flowers were towering over the wooden fence line. The woman insisted the plants were positioned to peek into her kitchen. She claimed the neighbor was hiding cameras inside the flower petals. She demanded a botany team behead the stalks immediately. The neighbor explained he just really liked gardening in the summer. The officer touched a flower and confirmed it was not a robot. The woman closed her blinds and whispered that the plants were watching. 26. A sleep-deprived dad called 911 to report a sonic torture session. He claimed his neighbor was intentionally testing a siren to induce madness. The police arrived as a car alarm blared for the 10th time. The neighbor was standing there holding a key fob with a confused look. The caller screamed that the honking was a targeted harassment campaign. He wanted the car destroyed and the keys confiscated as evidence. The neighbor explained the battery was dying and the alarm was glitching out. The officer helped disconnect the battery cable to stop the noise. The dad fell onto his lawn crying tears of joy and instant relief. 27. A dramatic homeowner dialed emergency services to report a natural disaster. He screamed that his property was being swallowed by rising floodwaters. The police arrived with rescue gear but found a wet sidewalk. The neighbor had left the sprinkler running for an extra 20 minutes. The water had created a small puddle near the caller's driveway. The man insisted his foundation was crumbling due to the aquatic assault. He demanded the hose be cut and the neighbor charged with waterboarding. The gardener turned off the tap and apologized for the runoff. The caller waded through the inch-deep puddle like he was crossing a raging river. 28. A city slicker called the station to report a jungle infestation. He told the operator that wild beasts were being summoned to the block. Officers arrived to hear peaceful bird sounds coming from a speaker. The neighbor was playing nature sounds to relax on his porch. The caller insisted the audio was a siren song for flying rats. He claimed real birds were attacking his roof because of the fake tweets. He wanted the speakers seized and the neighbor fined for disturbing the ecosystem. The neighbor switched the track to ocean waves instead. The caller screamed that now sharks would probably show up in his pool. 29. A furious veteran called dispatch to report a diplomatic crisis. He claimed a foreign nation had conquered the house across the street. The police arrived to find a family displaying an Italian flag. It was hanging slightly higher than the American flag on the porch. The caller screamed that this was an act of war and disrespect. He demanded the foreign fabric be burned or lowered immediately. The family explained they were just celebrating a soccer victory that day. The officer explained that cheering for Italy is not a felony. The man stood on his lawn saluting his own flag until the Italians went inside. 30. A grumpy retiree called the police regarding a massive debris field. He reported that hazardous materials were dumped on the shared green space. Officers rushed over and found a plastic tricycle and a Nerf ball. The caller insisted the colorful items were trespassing on his visual property. He claimed the toys were a tripping hazard for his imaginary guests. He wanted the toddler arrested or the bike impounded immediately. The young mother ran out to grab the toys and apologized profusely. The man yelled that she needed a permit to park plastic vehicles. He watched them leave with a look of pure victory on his face. 31. An angry man in a parka called the police during a blizzard. He reported a hostile land grab taking place in his driveway. The officers arrived to find a neighbor holding a plastic shovel. The caller screamed that the snow was being pushed onto his side. He insisted the pile of white powder was intentional property damage. He demanded the neighbor move every single snowflake back to his own yard. The neighbor explained he just slipped on the ice while clearing a path. The officer told them to go inside and drink cocoa. The man stood guard over the snow pile until it melted in spring. 32. A terrified grandmother dialed 911, whispering about a dead body on the lawn. She claimed a corpse was rotting in the sun for months. Police rushed to the scene expecting a homicide investigation. They found a plastic skeleton sitting in a lawn chair wearing sunglasses. The homeowner had left his Halloween decorations up since October because he was lazy. The caller insisted the bones were scaring the neighborhood children and her cats. She wanted the skeleton arrested for public indecency and horror. The neighbor put a Santa hat on the skull to make it festive. The grandmother fainted on her porch from the sheer shock. 33. An obsessive community planner called the station to report illegal commercial spam. He claimed the streets were being cluttered with unauthorized advertising materials. Officers arrived to find a cardboard sign taped to a lamppost. It announced a garage sale that was starting the next morning. The caller screamed that the sign was posted 12 hours too early. He insisted this was a violation of the Visual Peace Treaty. He demanded the police fingerprint the cardboard to find the culprit. The officer tore the sign down just to make him stop yelling. The man went home to write a letter to the mayor about font sizes. 34. A sleepy young woman called the police at dawn in a rage. She reported a loud industrial explosion happening right outside her window. The police arrived to find a dad pressure washing his siding. He was excitedly blasting away years of dirt at 6 in the morning. The caller insisted the water spray sounded like a machine gun attack. She claimed the noise was stealing her beauty sleep and sanity. She wanted the pressure washer confiscated and the dad handcuffed for noise pollution. The dad apologized and said he just got excited about cleaning. The officer told him to wait until noon or face a sleepy riot. 35. A paranoid tech hater ducked under his patio table and dialed emergency services. He reported an alien invasion or a government spy plane overhead. The police scanned the sky and found a small toy drone buzzing around. The neighbor's kid was trying to learn how to fly it without crashing. The caller screamed that the camera was mapping his bald spot for the internet. He insisted the device was stealing his thoughts through the roof shingles. He demanded the Air Force shoot it down immediately. The kid accidentally flew it into a tree anyway. The man cheered and declared victory over the robot uprising. 36. A sensitive nose owner called the authorities to report a chemical fire. She claimed thick smoke was choking the entire neighborhood block. Firefighters arrived ready to battle a blaze but found a stick of incense. The neighbor was doing yoga on her patio with a sandalwood scent. The caller insisted the smell was a spiritual assault on her nostrils. She screamed that the smoke was possessed and crossing property lines illegally. She wanted the yoga mat burned and the incense extinguished with a hose. The neighbor offered her a calming tea instead. The woman refused and sprayed air freshener aggressively toward the fence. 37. A nervous lawyer called the police to report a future lawsuit in progress. He pointed a shaking finger at a large black circle next door. It was a brand new trampoline with a safety net enclosure. The man claimed the bouncing device was a magnet for broken bones. He insisted it was tempting his children to trespass and injure themselves. He demanded the police dismantle the fun immediately to prevent a tragedy. The neighbor explained his kids just wanted to jump around. The lawyer started listing insurance codes and liability statutes. The officer told him to build a higher fence if he was that worried. 38. A grumpy shift worker called the station before a crime even happened. He reported the installation of a noise-generating torture device. Officers arrived to see a dad putting up a basketball hoop on the garage. The caller screamed that the sound of dribbling would destroy his life. He claimed the future thumping vibrations would crack his foundation walls. He demanded the rim be melted down before a single ball was thrown. The dad promised they would only play in the afternoons. The man refused to compromise and stood in the driveway, blocking the layup line. The police told him he cannot arrest a hypothetical noise. 39. A conservative grandmother called the sheriff to report a visual scandal. She claimed her neighbor was hanging obscene materials for the public to see. The deputy arrived to find a rainbow flag waving gently in the breeze. The woman insisted the colors were too bright and morally confusing. She screamed that the fabric was attacking her traditional values from across the street. She wanted the flag taken down and replaced with beige curtains. The neighbor came out and waved happily at the officer. The deputy explained that being colorful is protected by law. The woman closed her drapes and prayed for the neighborhood's eyes. 40. An allergic businessman dialed 911 to report a biological infestation. He claimed his neighbor was building a private army of wild beasts. The police investigated the alley and found 3 stray cats eating tuna. The neighbor was simply leaving out bowls of food for the hungry animals. The caller screamed that the area was becoming a feline gathering spot. He insisted the cats were plotting to scratch his luxury sedan paint. He demanded the neighbor be arrested for harboring fugitives with fur. The cats just meowed and ignored the screaming man. The officer told him to buy a car cover and walked away. 41. A sleep-deprived astronomer called the station screaming about light pollution. He reported a blinding flash that was destroying the night sky. The police arrived to find a motion sensor floodlight on a garage. The light was flickering on every time a moth flew by. The caller insisted the neighbor was signaling aliens with the beam. He claimed the strobe effect was giving him seizures and anxiety. He demanded the bulb be smashed or the neighbor arrested for harassment. The neighbor explained he just wanted to deter burglars. The officer told the man to buy blackout curtains. He stood in the driveway, shielding his eyes from the moth. 42. An entitled landscape artist called 911 in a state of panic. She reported a massive wall blocking her scenic vista. Officers arrived to find a recreational vehicle parked on the street. The neighbor was loading it up for a weekend camping trip. The woman screamed that the RV was ruining the neighborhood aesthetic. She insisted the beige fiberglass was a visual crime against humanity. She demanded the vehicle be towed before she lost her inspiration. The owner explained it would be gone in an hour. The woman refused to wait and set up an easel to paint the ugly RV. She named the painting Suburban Tragedy. 43. A nervous librarian called the police to report a sonic weapon. She claimed a metallic clanging was shattering her peace of mind. The police investigated and found a large set of wind chimes. They were swaying gently on the neighbor's front porch. The woman insisted the noise was worse than a heavy metal concert. She screamed that the chimes were designed to drive her insane. She wanted the tubes melted down and the neighbor fined for noise. The neighbor explained they were for feng shui and good energy. The officer held the chimes still to make them stop. The woman sighed and finally took a breath. 44. A paranoid conspiracy theorist watched his street and dialed emergency services. He reported a suspicious gathering of vehicles at a single residence. Officers arrived expecting a political uprising or a cult meeting. They found 6 minivans parked outside a house hosting a book club. The caller screamed that the women inside were plotting a revolution. He claimed the laughter and clinking glasses were codes for illicit activity. He demanded the police raid the living room and seize the novels. The women offered the officers some cheese and crackers. The man hid behind his curtains and wrote down all the license plate numbers. 45. A gardening snob called the authorities to report a botanical fraud. He claimed his neighbor was lowering the property values with fake nature. The police arrived to inspect the suspicious green lawn. It turned out to be high-quality artificial turf that needed no water. The caller screamed that the plastic blades were an insult to grass. He insisted the yard looked like a cheap mini golf course. He demanded the neighbor be forced to plant real seeds immediately. The neighbor was sitting in a lawn chair sipping tea on his perfect lawn. The officer told the man that jealousy is not a crime. 46. A safety-obsessed pedestrian called 911 dodging imaginary debris. He reported an illegal logging operation taking place in the suburbs. Officers arrived to find a man trimming a dead branch with a handsaw. The caller screamed that the falling twigs were lethal projectiles. He insisted the sawdust was creating a hazardous breathing environment for everyone. He wanted the tree confiscated and the saw taken as evidence. The neighbor explained the branch was actually about to fall on a car. The officer thanked him for the maintenance work. The caller put on a hard hat and ran across the street screaming for cover. 47. A privacy fanatic crawled across his lawn and dialed the police. He whispered that a digital eye was tracking his every move. Officers arrived to find a standard smart doorbell on the porch. The caller insisted the camera was recording his daily comings and goings. He claimed the neighbor was building a dossier on his life. He demanded the device be covered with tape or destroyed immediately. The neighbor showed the police the feed, which was just the street. The man refused to stand up and expose himself to the lens. He rolled back into his house while the officers watched in confusion. 48. A critical music lover called the station to report a public torture session. He claimed a dying animal was wailing in the house next door. The police arrived to find a teenager practicing chords on an acoustic guitar. The caller screamed that the off-key notes were a violation of the Geneva Convention. He insisted the amateur strumming was causing physical pain to his ears. He wanted the guitar seized and the boy banned from music. The teen apologized and said he was learning a love song. The officer told the man to turn on his radio. The critic slammed his window shut and turned up classical music. 49. A competitive holiday decorator called the police in a jealous rage. He reported a structural hazard that was blocking out the sun. Officers arrived to find a 20-foot inflatable Santa Claus in the yard. The caller screamed that the giant plastic man was overshadowing his lights. He insisted the air blower was wasting energy and annoying the grid. He demanded the Santa be deflated and arrested for being too jolly. The neighbor explained he just wanted to make the kids smile. The officer refused to arrest Santa Claus. The man stood in the shadow of the giant inflatable and kicked the plastic boot. And there you have it. Absolute proof that common sense is officially dead in the suburbs. If you think your neighbors are bad, just remember, at least they aren't calling the cops over illegal wind chimes or spicy pickle juice assaults. If these stories made you laugh or lose faith in humanity, smash that like button and subscribe to BrainFumble. We dig up the weirdest chaos so you don't have to. Hit the bell so you never miss a meltdown. Now tell me in the comments, which dispute was the most unhinged? The solar panel vampire or the heavy breathing lady? Let me know down below.